Did you know there's a critical timing element most people miss when attaching plants to moss poles? And it could make the difference between a thriving climbing masterpiece and a tangled mass of plant frustration. In this video, I'll break down the secret moss pole timing guide and show you exactly when to put your plant on a moss pole for the best results for your climbing plants. And I'll dive deep into some pro tips on making sure your plant is securely attached to the moss pole and how you can make sure that the moss pole is rock solid and won't tip over. I've got my Monstera Obliqua Peru here, and this is the plant that I'm going to be putting up on a moss pole, and I'll show you exactly why I think this plant is ready to go up on a moss pole, and I'll show you exactly how I put the plant on a moss pole. So to do that today, I am going to be using one of these. This is actually probably the first time I'm using one of these kinds of moss poles. If you know anything about me, you will know that I love to make my own moss poles. So this is definitely a departure for me, and I'm really excited to try this one out. So I'm going to show you how I put my plant up on this moss pole and how I'm going to actually make sure that plant is secure on the pole and that it's sitting in this pot and that this pot is also secure and that that moss pole is not going to topple over. Let's get started. So to do that, we're going to need a few things. Obviously, we're going to need a plant. We're going to need one of these things, but you don't necessarily have to use these. You can actually make your own moss pole that works just as well. I have with me a 14 centimeter transparent pot. It doesn't have to be transparent. It doesn't have to be 14 centimeters. It can be whatever it is that you have. And I also have a ceramic planter that I am going to be putting my pot in, and I'll tell you a bit more about that soon. Also, I am going to be using some Velcro plant ties to make sure that my plant is securely attached to the moss pole. Again, you don't have to use Velcro plant ties. I just find it just works really easy to keep the plant in position the easiest. Some people use paper clips, other people just, use a piece of string, anything, whatever it is that you can use to make sure that that plant is attached. Let's do it. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually assemble my moss pole, and I'm filling up my moss pole with a sphagnum moss tree fern fiber combination, which I really love using because the tree fern fiber really absorbs that water and nutrient solution very, very well. So it counteracts the hydrophobic nature of the moss pole. So that works really, really well. The first thing I'm going to do before I start to fill out this moss pole is figure out how much of this pole I'm actually going to have sitting in my pot. And I'll show you why I'm doing that in a second. So this is just about there. So this is about there, and I'm just sort of guesstimating. It's got these little holes here, so I'm going to use these to count 1, 2, 3, 4. So at the top of the fourth one is where I know is the top of my pot. So that's where that's going to sit. You can use, a marker or a texter to sort of give you a guide, or you can do whatever you need to do to actually be able to remember that. So I need to figure out the inside and the outside. So that's the outside. It's got the little branding. Again, these are very much Nora problems because if you're not using a leafy brand pole, you're not going to have these issues. So I need to close that like so. And then there's these little lines that you need to follow to sort of actually create the actual pole. So, it is a bit fiddly, I have to say. It doesn't help that I tend to be a little bit impatient. But there we are. I think that is looking good. So what I'm going to do now is fill up my pole with the sphagnum moss up to the point where I identified that fourth level. So I just get that, my moss, or rather my moss and tree fern fiber combo. Put that there. I think that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Put a little bit more. And the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want that sphagnum moss going all the way to the end. I'm going to fill this part of my pole with Leca. So I'm putting my plant up in Leca clay balls. So I'm going to fill that up with Leca clay balls. But if you're not using Leca, if you're using pond or if you're using soil, potting mix, whatever it is you're using, that would be a good thing to do. Just fill the rest of that bit over here with whatever substrate you're using for your plant. So I think I'm happy with this amount, and all I need to do now is fold this over like so and close it like that. That will work well. So there are all these little slits along here that you just use to just fix that in. Yay! I actually did it, guys. How beautiful does that look? That really, really looks awesome. Of course, you're going to get some falling out, right? But that is absolutely okay. So now what I'm going to do is going to get my Leca clay balls and shove them in there and hope they stay. So these are my Leca clay balls that have been soaking for not less than 24 hours. So all I'm going to do now is get those clay balls and put them in there. And basically just try and get them to not fall out. This is the tricky bit. I think I'm happy with that for now. I'll get back to this a little bit later. So this is my plant over here, and I'm going to show you why I think this plant is ready to go up on a moss pole. So as you can see, this plant is still quite small, has been small for a long time actually, and I've been asking people for a while what they think. Should I put it up on a moss pole or not? Some people said yes, some people said no, but I didn't because I wanted to see this little bit here where you've got the area roots coming through, starting to come through, because this area root here is what's going to grow into the moss pole. So I needed that to happen first. So I'll just take the plant out of this pot and show you what that looks like. Oh my goodness, look at that. Look at that root and that root over there. How beautiful, beautiful is that? It's just stunning. Oh my, I am so happy with this plant. Look at this. This is also doing so, so well. So this bit here, that is a root looking to form. So when I put this plant up on that moss pole, this root is going to start growing into the moss pole and taking advantage of the moss pole. So it'll really anchor in there and it'll start to derive nutrition from the nutrient solution that's soaked in the sphagnum moss, and it is going to be fantastic. I'm really, really happy. So this is what you really want to be seeing when you've got a really, really small plant. So what you're not really doing is getting your tiny, tiny tissue culture plant that's like this and putting it up on a moss pole. It's still quite small. You have to give the plant enough time for it to actually, have a good root system going over there. And it'll tell you, the plant will tell you that it's ready because you start to see that stalking, it starts to get taller or longer, whichever way you want to go. And you start to see those area roots, those little buds over there with the area roots coming through. And then you know that it's time. So it is time for my plants, and I am going to do that. So I love to actually attach my plant to the moss pole before I put it in the pot. I find that it just works so much easier for me. It's easier for me to control where I'm putting my plant. But before I do that, I'm going to get rid of some of the old, like little leaves like this one. That's not really going to do anything. So I just sort of pull that off with my fingers, and I'll just get rid of that. I've got this little bit here. Just get rid of things that are not really bringing anything to the table right now, so that plant can just really focus on growth. Let me see if there's anything else here. So these are all the little sticks. When it was a wet stick, all that bit there, we don't need that anymore. The plant is well established now. And these teeny tiny first leaves, oh my goodness, that can just go because we want our plant to look fabulous from day one. Okay, so the next step is I'm going to attach my plants to the moss pole. Remember how I got my pot and I measured how high up I needed, how low I needed to be in the pot? So there, so that is where I know that my plant is going to sit there. The roots are going to be in there, and that's where I want my plant to be. Just about where that sphagnum moss is starting. And I'm not sure I've explained this. I'll just say it again just in case I haven't. So the reason I don't want this sphagnum moss going into my pot is because this sphagnum moss is going to stay moist for quite a long time. So if it stays moist consistently, constantly, that'll mean my roots are exposed to this wet sphagnum moss. They aren't getting aerated. The chances of my roots getting root rot is very, very high. So we don't want to do that. So another thing about this, when you've got a plant that's like this and you've got the little area roots there, you want to position the area roots towards the sphagnum moss. So you really want that root to be in close contact with the sphagnum moss so it can just start to grow really, really quickly. So that's exactly where I need my plants to be. You can see they're over here. So I've got them separated. There's a little bit of space in between there. So as they grow up, each of them have their little own real estate in which to grow. So now I grab my what is it? My Velcro plant tie. Oh my goodness. I absolutely forgot what this thing is called. So this Velcro plant tie that I cut is too short. Da, Nora. The good thing about Velcro plant tie. Oh my goodness. That is, oh my goodness. Is because it's Velcro, you can just attach the one piece to the other piece and it just becomes one long piece. So yay. So the Leafy brand actually does have white, oh my, it's that word again, Velcro plant tie. The Leafy brand does have white Velcro plant tie. So that really looks nice with their poles, but I'm telling you, I looked for hours. Okay, maybe not hours. I looked for a good 5 minutes for the Velcro plant tie that I have from the Leafy brand. I couldn't find it. So there, I just go back to my normal green Velcro plant tie. So if you're interested in making your plant look really, really pretty with a white Velcro plant tie from the Leafy brand, it does exist. Too bad I couldn't show it to you. But there we are. So my plants are secure on this pole, and now I'm actually going to put this in the pot. So I'll put my Leca in my pot. This is where things get a little bit hairy. So if you are using potting mix, this works so much better. But using Leca is a bit fiddly, so I am going to do this. So I put that initial Leca in there. Oh, there we go. There we go. So putting that Leca in the pot at the start, make sure that the Leca that's in the moss pole doesn't fall out as we make the plant vertical. So now I've got my moss pole right where I need it. So just squishing it a little bit to make sure that it's in there right to the bottom, which I think it is. And I'm really happy with that. You can check that out. That looks really, really good. And already it is actually quite stable. So all I need to do now is fill the rest of this pot with Leca and right, I'm done filling my pot up with Leca. That looks really, really nice. That pole is very, very sturdy. So one thing I like to do when I'm doing something like this is just get an acrylic stick, a chopstick, anything really, just to make sure that those spaces, like over here, you can see some of this part here doesn't have any Leca clay balls, just to make sure that all that space is taken up by the Leca. Okay. That was not very helpful. There we go. So that just makes sure that my roots are not hanging about without any Leca where they will be growing. So there we are. That is my plant looking really, really good. I'm telling you, that is so stable. It is unreal. It is absolutely unreal. It is so good. I really, really love how this plant is looking. And as you can see, I've got the two of them there. They look really, really beautiful, and my plant is really going to flourish on this pole. Now, Another thing I like to do to make sure that my plant is going to be absolutely even more stable is to use a heavy ceramic pot. This is my beautiful water bead ceramic pot that I got from Angus and Celeste. I love this pot. It is absolutely beautiful. It is heavy, 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 and it fits my 14 centimeter pots really, really well. I put my plant in there, and that's what that looks like. It looks absolutely beautiful. So today I've shown you how I decide when to put my plant up on a moss pole. I've shown you how I actually do it, especially when I'm using a moss pole like this one. And I've also shown you how to make sure that your moss pole remains stable. I'm going to fill up my reservoir with my nutrient solution for my plant that's living in Leca clay bowls. Put it on a bright, warm spot and just watch this baby climb up to the heavens. Check out this next video where I show you how to water moss poles. I'll see you there.